Happy Friday. I'm not going to waste your time today. I have some start-sit options for Week 7 on today's show. Drop any additional players or questions in the comments. And without further ado, this is the Anomaly Podcast. Let's start off with the recap. As you see here with the Week 6 recap, we have some exceptions to the rule here as Deshaun Watson and Miles Sanders were on last Friday's video. However, before Sunday, they were ruled out, so they were, taken out of our counting numbers, if we want to say that. But overall, we had a pretty good week. We had about, five or so right, 2 shakies, and of course 3 wrongs. Starting here at the quarterback position, we're going to talk about Brock Purdy, and I'm going to start him this week against the Minnesota Vikings. But let's address the elephant in the room. Yes, he's coming off of his worst game of the season. And yes, last Friday I started the video by saying, start Brock Purdy against my Cleveland Browns. That didn't go as planned, but I'm going to double down on that take this week and start him again against the Minnesota Vikings, especially with the byes, with guys like Joe Burrow and such on bye. But Brock Purdy, he has eclipsed 20-plus points in 3 of his last 4 games. Last week was the, of course, exception. But he now has a strong get-right game here against the Vikings, as Minnesota has allowed the 10th most passing yards this year and fantasy points to the quarterback position. We have seen high-powered offenses put up numbers against this defense. Guys like Jalen Hurts and the Eagles, Justin Herbert and the Chargers, and of course Pat Mahomes and the Chiefs, as those 3 quarterbacks averaged about 25 points per game in this matchup against the Minnesota defense this season. Brock Purdy might not be on the level of those quarterbacks, obviously, but his offense is. He still has the weapons around him, and not to mention they have a chip on their shoulder. I expect a big bounce-back game for Purdy and the Niners to demolish the Minnesota Vikings. On the flip side of this matchup, it's going to be very ugly for the Vikings this weekend, and it all starts with Captain Kirk Cousins, as the 49ers have allowed the 4th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks this year, and they also generate pressure at the 6th highest rate. There's a lot of injuries and a lot of, questions there with the Minnesota offense, and it's not going to be easy this week against a angry 49ers defense. But given that 6 teams are on bye, maybe you're in a position where you need to start Kirk Cousins. If you have another option, I would go that option, as the Niners are someone that you don't really want to play against, especially when they're coming off of a loss. And I really think the Niners will try and make a statement victory in this one. But why not? Let's go all out. I'm so confident that the 49ers will have a statement victory this weekend that I would honestly sit Alexander Madison and Jordan Addison as well. Of course, if you can, given the teams that are on bye. But as far as Alexander Madison, he has proven to be kind of like a safer play this year, as you can rely on him to get you like the 10, 11 points a week. But this is not most weeks, as he faces the 49ers. The San Francisco 49ers defense has allowed the 6th fewest rushing yards and just 3 rushing touchdowns this season to the running back position. They have a high-powered offense, the 49ers, and that means that the Vikings are also going to be in catch-up mode this game, in my opinion. This is a very similar matchup to when the Vikings played the Eagles earlier in the season, and the Eagles held Madison to 5 fantasy points for the entirety of the game. He is not a must-sit guy this week, but I would definitely steer in another direction if you have the depth on your bench. For Jordan Addison, I'm going to ask for your guys' opinion down in the comments, as I do believe that the Vikings team will be down big early in this game, and so catch-up mode is going to be the option and the offense for this team in this matchup. And with that being said, Jordan Addison could see a lot of volume, as they're going to need to pass a lot, and Jordan Addison is the number 1 wide receiver as of today, with, of course, Jefferson out with injury. But on the flip side, if Jordan Addison doesn't find the end zone in a matchup like this, you'd really have to rely on this rookie to get you 6 to 7 catches, 60 to 70 receiving yards to be fantasy relevant. And that's just a tall task against the 49ers defense. But let me know in the comments. I'll put a 50-50 for now. I would lean sit, but let me know down in the comments what you would do with Jordan Addison. However, the only Viking I would start this week, TJ Hockenson. Of course, that's pretty obvious, as Hockenson is the tight end 3 on the season. He's only had 1 week where he hasn't scored in double digits. The 49ers, no doubt, are a tough matchup, but if they are in catch-up mode like I'm predicting, Hockenson is going to be the best receiving threat in this offense, and Kirk Cousins is going to be looking for him. So it's a pretty obvious one, but start TJ Hockenson. I would sit Cousins, Addison, and Alexander Madison this weekend against the 49ers. At the running back position, we're going to talk about Brian Robinson, or B-Rob, if you want to call him that, as he's been a top 15 running back 4 out of the 6 weeks this season. It's clearly his backfield there in Washington, as when games are competitive or in the favor of Washington, Brian Robinson gets almost all of the touches out of the backfield. This is the team that's going to be playing maybe the worst team in football this week in the New York Giants, And Brian Robinson it should have a really, really big game. Not to mention the Giants are starting a backup quarterback in Tyrod Taylor, and they've given up the second most fantasy points to running backs this season. I expect Washington to go up early and Brian Robinson to, I guess, carry the load from there. Rashad White, we're going to sit him here this week against the tough Atlanta Falcons defense, as Rashad White has been a prime sit candidate all year in these videos. And I don't think that's going to change here, as he had a big game in Week 2 against the Chicago Bears. But in the other 4 or 5 games this season, he's only averaged 8 fantasy points per game throughout that stretch in full PPR. So that also gives the running backs a boost, and he's only averaging 8 fantasy points per game. This is a guy that's getting the volume, but he's still very matchup dependent. And this week, he's facing a top 10 level rush defense in the Atlanta Falcons. So again, he's been a prime sit candidate all year. That's not going to change here. The Baltimore backfield against the Detroit Lions, we'll make this one quick. Both Gus Edwards and Justice Hill, ever since Dobbins went down, they've been very hard to start on a weekly basis, as sure, they might be on your roster, but you can't ever pull the trigger to start these guys on a weekly basis, and for good reason. But this week, they're playing a top 3 level defense in the NFL in the Detroit Lions, a defense that's the number one rush defense, and the 6th overall defense this year. They've only allowed 3 rushing touchdowns this year to the running back position. I think this week, Baltimore, it's going to be a very tough game on both sides of the ball. You might be in a position where you need to start one of these guys. I would prefer to go a different route, even given the bye weeks. So sit the Baltimore backfield, as Lamar will be the backfield. Jonathan Taylor against the Cleveland Browns, another tough matchup for the running back position. But I'm actually going to start Jonathan Taylor this week against the Cleveland Browns, as again, I hate to admit it, but I think this is going to be a trap game for us this upcoming Sunday, as the Colts just lost Anthony Richardson for the season, and Gardner Minshew hasn't looked the greatest so far. But the running backs in Indy have, as Zach Moss and Jonathan Taylor I'm talking about, of course. But Jonathan Taylor, he's working his way back up gradually, getting to the guy in this backfield yet again. And no doubt, I think this week is going to be a very tough matchup against the Browns. I mean, the Browns are the 4th best rush defense and the number 1 overall defense in the NFL. However, if the Colts have any chance, if they want any chance to stay in this game, I think it'll have to be on the backs of Zach Moss and Jonathan Taylor, whether that's through the air or on the ground, and that should produce tons of volume for the both of those guys in the backfield. Again, I think this is going to be a trap game for the Browns. I think the Colts might actually have a chance in this game, and I think if that is the case, Jonathan Taylor's going to have a pretty good day. And I think even though he's facing maybe the best defense in football, I like the upside of Jonathan Taylor. Let's not forget he's a top 5 caliber back when he is fully healthy and fully ramped up. So start Jonathan Taylor despite the Cleveland Browns matchup. But for his teammate, however, in the wide receiver room, Michael Pittman, I'm going to sit him this week against the Cleveland Browns. Again, whether if it's a close game or not, I think the Browns have 2 really, really talented corners and 2 very underrated corners in Denzel Ward and MJ Emerson. And those 2 guys are going to make it a very long day for a guy like Michael Pittman. And it's also going to make it a hard day for Gardner Minshew to get the ball to Michael Pittman, because those corners are very talented. And I know Pittman has been a very safe play this season, but the Browns defense is operating on a different level right now. You would then be relying on a backup quarterback to face the best defense in football and get Michael Pittman the ball against 2 very good corners to be fantasy relevant. It's just a very, tough hill to climb, and I would go a different route if you can this weekend. But again, given the bye weeks, it could be, you might have to just suck it up and play Michael Pittman. Rashod Rice here, of course, he's been the rookie to step up for Kansas City. And let's not forget, Mecole Hardman just got traded to Kansas City, so there's some questions there. Do we want to start Rashod Rice, given the continuity that Mecole Hardman has already with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid and this offense? I think no doubt you have to this week. He's facing the Chargers this week. The Chargers have the 31st defense in the NFL, of course, second to last. And they also have the very worst pass defense in the entire NFL. Again, over this season, Rashod Rice has continued to get more work, and Patrick Mahomes has continued to praise him this year. I think this is a week where we can get that first breakout game from Rashod Rice, maybe 2 touchdowns, or maybe he cracks like 120 receiving yards. I think this is the week where Rashod Rice makes his name. But at the tight end position, dare I say it, start Kyle Pitts this week. Again, maybe this is my Gator fandom getting in the way, but start him this week, as Kyle Pitts is averaging 10.7 fantasy points per game over the last month, and in those games he's had 6+ targets in each game. It's definitely been an odd month for Kyle Pitts, but that's good for us fantasy players. as it might not be the breakout season that we were hoping for to be the tight end one in fantasy football, but he's still a starting caliber tight end with these stats over the last month in fantasy. Plus, the upside is higher as Atlanta continues to throw him the ball, as well as Jonnu Smith, but especially if Desmond Ridder gets more comfortable throwing the ball and pushing the ball down the field, Kyle Pitts should be the biggest beneficiary of that, especially as Kyle Pitts gets healthier and healthier from his knee injury last season. I know he has a tough matchup this week against the Tampa Bay Bucks, but I think you should start him this week. Again, who knows? Maybe that's my Gator fandom getting in the way. That's going to do it here for today's video. Again, happy Friday. Hopefully you enjoy your weekend. Good luck to your real-life team, your fantasy teams, and drop any additional comments down below or any questions. Should I start player A or player B? Drop those questions, and of course we'll discuss it as what is the best option for our fantasy teams this weekend. It's a very tough week with all the teams on bye, so of course I'll respond to you as quickly as I possibly can. But without further ado, again, good luck to everything this weekend. I'll see you guys on Tuesday for another great week. Until then, stay happy, stay healthy. I'm out of here.